Hello, my friends. It is day 247, and we're reading Ezekiel chapter 25 through chapter 27. But before we get into the recap today, I want to thank you for taking a moment to check out this video. Hopefully, you're finding the yearly Bible reading program to be helpful and to be an encouragement to you as you read the Bible all the way through. We are now in our 9th month of the Bible reading plan, which means we literally have read 3/4 of the Bible. We only have 3 more months left, and we are in the final stretch. And yet, we are still reading in the Old Testament. So, if you've ever imagined rather, how significant or how relevant or how important the Old Testament is, all you need to do is read one of these Bible plans, and you'll discover that the majority of your year will be spent reading the Old Testament, which means it is practically impossible to understand truthfully and biblically the New Testament until we have gained a good grasp of the Old Testament. So here we are, and we're reading in the book of Ezekiel, one of the last major prophets. We have one more to go, and he has a lot to say to Jerusalem, but he also has a lot to say, as we will see today, as we have seen today, to the enemies and the antagonists of Jerusalem. And so there are a number of people who are being addressed here in abbreviated formats, especially when compared to Jeremiah. Jeremiah obviously spent a lot of time talking to the nations, but here we see that there are little snippets, little brief statements until we get to Tyre. And we'll talk about Tyre as once we get there. But in chapters 25, we see that there's an address given to Ammon, Moab, Edom, and Philistia. These are individuals that we are very aware had issues with Israel, but more importantly, whenever they were at their lowest and when they were being chastised by God, these nations took it upon themselves to intensify the struggle and to exploit the opportunity. We see this over and over again. So, for instance, look at this in chapter 25 when speaking of Ammon. In verse 3, it says, "Because you cheered when my people was defiled, or when my temple was defiled, mocked Israel in her desolation, and laughed at Judah as she went away into exile, I will allow nomads from the eastern deserts to overrun your country." And so he goes on to show how they're going to be in the same predicament as Israel and Judah. In chapter 25, verse 8, he tells Moab, "Because the people of Moab have said that Judah is just like all the other nations, I will open up their eastern flank and wipe out their glorious frontier towns." You see, in Edom's case, the people have sinned greatly by avenging themselves against the people of Judah. In Philistia, the people of Philistia have acted against Judah out of bitter revenge and long-standing contempt. We see a number of issues with Tyre, who had become a major empire, not empire, but major city. And there were a number of things that they were known for, but more importantly, they were a port city, and they had all sorts of success building what was considered to be a major trading enterprise. So you can imagine, as this king had this sort of success, there was all sorts of pride. And many times we see this as being relevant or speaking of, some deified or some satanic force or being. We'll look at that in the next reading on tomorrow. But really, this is an address to a city who has become proud and resembles the characteristics of a Satan, if you will, rather than the characteristics of an empire that realizes God has put them in a particular place to fulfill his will and his desire. So we want to take a closer look at that, but we want to remember that this is an actual place with an actual king, and the characteristics seem to resemble that of the evil forces that are unseen but very well active in God's creation. And so These things are very, very incredible to consider and read through and think through. And it goes to show you how, even though the Bible does not necessarily in the Old Testament or the Tanakh does not necessarily make reference to what we call spiritual warfare or spiritual beings hostilely acting against God, they're very well there. And it is confirmation that perhaps these beings are not simply roaming around causing chaos, but they are influencing, if you will, the powers that be to act against the Lord and his plan for his son. One quick glance at Psalm chapter 2 would put this all in perspective, that there's something going on where the forces of the world have partnered with the forces of darkness. And because of this partnership, the forces of darkness are basically leveraging the power and the authority of these empires, these kings, and even God's people at time. When I mean by that, when I mean leveraging, I mean they are under the control of sin and death. And there is a sense of acting that out whenever you have certain responsibilities, such as a king or any other role in society. So that's what we're getting here. We're getting a first glance, a good glance at what this must be like and how it looks in the Old Testament. Now, when we come into the New Testament, it becomes even more full. It's a bigger depiction, a bigger presentation of all of this, a thorough explanation even. But we see it, hints of it in the Old Testament, and it's good to pay attention to it. All right. So, friends, great day of reading. Tell me what you think. Leave your comments in the comment box below and let us know what your thoughts are. And I believe it'll be very helpful to us all. Until next time, thank you for watching. Take care. God bless. And remember, live by the word.